morning, we're in for a real treat. As you've seen, we're really excited about the future of wearables, about their potential to transform our health, our play, and our athletic performance. And in this area, the expertise of our next guest, Mounir is unrivaled. As a senior sports technologist of the United States Olympic Committee, he has a comprehensive background in human-centered design and lean development principles. Today, he leads and manages the development of sports technology solutions for both the US Olympics and the Paralympic sports programs. Let's take a look.
Welcome to the 22nd Olympic Winter Games.
Here is a guess. There's not a single athlete who marched into the opening ceremony who didn't dream of winning. But what exactly is winning? An athlete more than most understands that success is defined by more than just what hangs around your neck. And success is not just being there, but understanding what it takes to get there. The triumph over sacrifice is the win. The same whether your games sparkle in the glow of precious metal or drowned in the flow of salty tears. How many found both to be true? This trip to an uncertain place was filled with victories both public and private, expected and surprising. For the largest ever American Winter Olympic team, it was a journey of joy and sometimes pain, but ultimately one of powerful meaning. The Bravo Delta sled hockey line had once fought for their country and paid a steep price in doing so. In Sochi, they pulled on another American uniform and went forth as brothers with arms locked again, this time in a gentler battle. This time, their fellow citizens could watch, they could be grateful, they could cheer. And that was maybe the best part about these games, what they did to a country. Night after night and day after day, they were a campfire around which people gathered to proudly watch their team do inspiring and wonderful things. Things that must surely make it easy to understand why wearing these letters and bearing this emblem is the greatest honor an athlete can have. By now, Heidi Closer's story is well known. Simple and sincere, it both asks a question and provides an answer. A pre-games injury knocked her out of competition, but she only wanted to know this: am I still an Olympian? And of course, the answer was yes. Like each and every member of Team USA who came to Sochi, I guess that Closer dreamed of winning gold, but she came for the most important thing: to be an Olympian. For that is the real dream, one which came alive this winter for each in his or her very own special way.
Please join me in welcoming Mounir to the stage.
To be an Olympian, right? What an honor. Allow me to take you back in time. Let's go back together to 1936. Let's go to the Olympic Games that were held in Berlin. Berlin, Germany, 1936, you could imagine what the political environment was like, right? But the whole world was waiting for these two gentlemen to compete on the track. The German athlete, Lutz Long, held the European record for long jump, and Jesse Owens, the American athlete, held the world record for the long jump back then. And it was going to be the first time that these two would have been on the same field against each other. Now, on the morning of August 4th, that moment came. They go for qualifiers. Lutz Long qualifies no problems whatsoever. Jesse Owens, on the other hand, misses his first two trials, his first two jumps He failed those. So for the world record holder, that was quite a distressful moment. Sitting at the edge of the track, under everyone's eyes, he had his head in his hands, desperate. What do I do? I'm on the brink of going back home with no medal whatsoever. Now, something really unexpected happened then. Lutz Long, the German athlete, walked up to Jesse Owens and whispered something into his ears. Some minutes later, Jesse takes the track, he qualifies. In the afternoon, they go head-to-head, they break the Olympic record for 5 consecutive times, and the competition ends with Jesse Owens winning the gold medal, and Long being the first one to congratulate him, besides taking the silver medal as well. This is a simple story about friendship and about excellence. It's a story that resembles what the Olympic values are about. Now, these two gentlemen, they remained friends for the years to come, and in one of his last letters, Long writes these words. Unfortunately, Long fell on the battlefield in 1943, but these words are a very good example of what the Olympics are about. Now, times have changed, and if we go to the most recent Olympic Games, to the Sochi Olympic Games, the same concepts are reflected in the words of the current president of the International Olympic Committee. Times have changed, but the Olympic values have stayed the same. These are just some of the values that have drawn me to begin working with the US Olympic Committee. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, because I get this question all the time. Where are you from? And I don't know what the short answer is. The long answer is that I'm originally from Lebanon. I grew up in Cyprus. I went back to Lebanon for my undergrad. I flew to the UK. Then I lived almost all of my life in Italy so far, where I met my beautiful wife, who is from Spain. And to make things complicated, we moved to the US, and we just had a baby some months ago. Thank you. Now, I myself come from a biomedical engineering background. I hold a PhD in bioengineering. And trust me, up until 6 years ago, I always thought that I would be working in the clinical market. Actually, I was working with orthopedic surgeons. I was working with patients. And I was supporting the orthopedic surgeons in their decision-making process so that they could identify what is the best intervention, what's the best operation, and eventually what's the best recovery and rehab process that we could design for a specific patient, taking into consideration that that patient is a unique person and could not be categorized among the masses of other patients who share similar injuries. Then 6 years ago, I discovered sport. I discovered my passion in sport. I set up my own business in Italy. I began working with wearables. I sold my business and moved to the US to help Team USA. Now, working in the Olympics, you're working in quite a competitive field. It's so competitive that even when a race is over, even when the athletes cross the finish line, it's quite hard to tell not only who won, but who walked back home with the silver, and who walked back home with the bronze, and who walked back home, unfortunately, empty-handed, even after the finish line. So at the Olympics, we always talk about this 1%. We're always asking ourselves, how do we get that 1% margin, which is really and truly the difference between a gold medal and no medal? How do we do that? Now, talking about medals, this is the dream of each and every Olympic and Paralympic athlete. No matter for which country they are competing, this is their dream. And getting medals, it's not only about training hard. It's quite complex. It's complicated. It's made of different layers that are very hard to define, and it's not going to be the topic of today. But what I want to share with you today is that we have come to the conclusion that technology is going to play a much more important role in the future in terms of who wins the medals and which countries win most medals out of all. Technology is crucial. Now, at the same time, athletes are people just like you and me. Athletes train, they eat, they sleep, they have relationships. They go through things that each and everyone here goes through on a daily basis. They even get stuck in traffic every now and then. But what makes athlete exceptional and what makes them so competitive is not only their training, but it's because they have around them a structure that has optimized the understanding of all of these elements that you see behind me. A structure that helps them understand and quantify different parts of their style, of their lifestyle, different parts of their training that allows them to be as competitive as they are. Now let's focus a little bit about how did we go about these things and how did we evaluate an athlete's performance in the past. Only 10 years ago, so I won't even go many years back, only 10 years ago, we still had to ask athletes to come into labs, to come into standardized environments where we had the best experts and hook up different wires, different cables to them, and ask them to perform an action that was as close as possible to the action that they would perform out on the field. So imagine for a second that you have a soccer player, and imagine bringing them into a room just like this one, and asking them, hey, could you just sprint down that aisle and do 2-3 cutting movements there because we are interested in understanding how we could help you prevent any knee injuries? So the soccer player will most probably do that. But how close do you think that run and those cuts are going to be similar to what he would do or she would do on the field? So we were acquiring lots of data. We were developing many sophisticated algorithms. We were getting to some very, very accurate conclusions. But were they really? The one thing that we were not able to do was to study or to analyze an action that happened exactly as it would happen out on the field, in the natural environment of where an athlete lives almost all of their career. So if we were to trace back in time how athletes used to evaluate their performance and how we used to help them evaluate their performance, we are going from an area where we had to bring athletes into a standardized environment and ask them to fake a movement to a position today where we are able to be out on the field with them. So as our athletes right now are preparing for the 2016 games in Rio, I guarantee you that we are in a much better position with respect to where we were 2 years ago. It's amazing. Now, within this big technology world, we believe one thing. We believe that wearable technology is going to change the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games forever. It's going to change the games in ways that we can only imagine today. In the keynote yesterday, many speakers talked about scratching the surface. We are only scratching the surface in the Olympic world. Now, we're talking about wearable technology today, but it's not really a discovery of today, is it? Because many people have been working on this for the past 30 years, and if you trace back in time, you'd be marveled at what some of the brightest engineers and developers who are working in the aviation industry were working on. They were the pioneers of today's wearable world. They are the ones who inspired this whole new generation to begin developing everything that we needed to get to where we are today. Now, in sports, two specific things happened. And these two things happened exactly in 2002, 12 years ago. The first thing was that smaller electronics, smaller devices that had in them everything that we have today in any wearable tech were becoming available on the market. So the accelerometers, the gyroscopes, the compass, and whatnot, they became available. They had all different wires connected to them. They were the size more or less of this clicker. But still, they allowed people, and they allowed athletes and people working with athletes to begin evaluating athletes' performance and collecting data from the athletes as they were performing their actions on the field of play. Now, another thing happened also in 2002. The scientists and the engineers who were working with the athletes had to become really, really fit. I was the first one who went on that run, but we had to sacrifice a laptop. And I was never as fast. So I said, you know what, I'll be behind the camera. Now, the challenges in 2002 were enormous. We had to deal with battery life. We had to deal with wireless transmission ranges. We could not transmit a wireless signal from this end of the stage to that end of the stage. It was just impossible. We didn't have enough computing power on board of the sensors, so we had to make sure that we had a laptop, a running laptop, each and every time we had to collect any data and do any experiments on our athletes. But we had lots and lots of challenges, and still, we could make it work. Today, all of these challenges, luckily, are not there anymore. Today, we take it for granted that we will have enough battery life, that we will have enough wireless transmission, we will have enough computing power on board of the sensors and the devices to do exactly what we want to do. So imagine the possibilities that you guys can work on. Imagine the contributions that you guys can make. So let's pause for a second. I want you to reflect just for 5 seconds on one sport that you're passionate about or that you really like following on TV or live. 5 seconds. Now, I want you to spend the next 10 seconds thinking about, from your perspective as developers, as experts in your field, how can you help an athlete or a coach in that specific sport? And I'm willing to bet you that in the past 15 seconds, you have come up with an idea. You have come up with probably a slightly tangible idea. It's not really there yet, but you've thought about it. And this is where I believe you guys can make the difference. You can help us begin answering the question, how do we achieve that 1% difference? And mind you, that 1% difference is the difference between gold and nothing. So allow me to spend the next minutes with you about what to expect if you decide to work with Olympic sports. What kind of elements will you be working on? What kind of elements will you be facing? They really could be grouped under 4 categories. The first one, which is the primary one, is signal processing. Anything that you will be doing with technology or with wearable technology and with athletes will involve some kind of signal processing, whatever you're doing. Signal processing could mean many things. The basic idea is that we measure something and we want to calculate something else. So how are we going to go from the measured quantity to the calculated quantity? The second one is pattern detection. So imagine having a wearable technology, for example, on the skis of this skier because you're interested in giving the coach some kind of information. How are you going to isolate all of the noise coming from the vibrations of the contact between the skis and the snow and the real movement that the skier is going through? So that's another thing to be aware of. The third one is the wireless transmission protocols. Today, we take it for granted that we can have an athlete one area of the world, and the coach is in another area of the world, and that coach needs to be able to not only look at the performance of their athletes, but be able to interact with them and give them feedback. And the fourth, the last but not least, is living the sport. You have to become experts at how athletes move their bodies during that sport. You have to be aware of all the physiological, all of the biomechanical constraints, because then those will begin helping you in your development work. So if you imagine for a second that you're developing the next greatest technology for track and field, for running and sprinting, you know for sure that during running, you only have one foot in contact with the ground. And when that foot is in contact with the ground, it's not moving. So that helps you as a developer developing different cycles of your algorithm rather than having a one calculation from when action starts until action ends. This is very, very important. Now this, though, would be useless without finding a balance between what coaches are looking for and between what you guys are capable of providing them with. Now, we all drive cars. We've all driven our car, and we have all pulled into the gas station when it was time to pull into the gas station. And we've all slowed down when we were going too fast, right? Now, we are making all of these wise decisions by looking at a dashboard. We're not car experts, are we? We don't necessarily have to understand all the mechanisms going on in the engines and in the electronics of the car, do we? But still, we are making extremely wise decisions. So it's our responsibilities as developers and as technologists to put the coaches in the driving position. And this can only happen when you find the right balance. Because the last thing that you want to do is either have a highly developed system or a fully applicable system, which are going to be both far away from that yellow dot you see above me. You want to be as close as possible to that yellow line, and the only way in which you get to that yellow dot, and the only way in which you could get there is finding the balance between the minimum information that the coach needs to make a wise decision and the maximum information that you guys are capable of providing. Now, at the Olympic Committee, we have 3 guiding principles that we always work with. And I hope that these 3 principles will help you in your work. The first one is spending time on understanding what is really the problem. In my career so far, I have rushed down a wrong path many times, but only to discover too late that this was not the right solution to begin pursuing. And each and every time this happened, I got frustrated with myself because I was thinking, Mounir, you need to figure out what the problem is. Even though finding a solution is very satisfactory, but right now, trust me, I'm in no rush to go down a wrong pathway anymore. And just to give you an example regarding how this can happen. So just after the Olympic Games in London, we had some of our coaches coming up with a need to be able to use video technology in a better way. We want to be able to use video, we want to be able to digitize frames, we need to be able to analyze how the athlete is moving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the more time we spent with them, and the more we spent on figuring out what the question was, we really came to the core of the challenge. They were after a solution that would help them give better feedback to their athletes during a training session. They didn't really care about whether it was video or something else. So if we had started working with video from the beginning, we most probably would not have been where we are today with this specific sport. Where today, we have wearable technology worn by the athletes, and we have a group of experts working with them to provide the coaches and the athletes with the information that they're looking for. With that answer to that one question that we have come up with as we're working towards the Rio Games. So I cannot underestimate, and I cannot talk enough about how important it is to figure out what the problem is. Now, once you've done that, you need to put yourself in a position where you're able to execute, measure, and learn as quick as you can. Because the last thing you want to do is understand what the problem is, figure out what the problem is, and then dedicate your next 2 years working on a solution without exposing it to your client, or to your user, or to the coach or athlete in this case. So the quicker you can get to them, the quicker you can learn from them, the quicker you can understand whether your idea and hypothesis is a valid one, And the more input you get from them, the more coach-driven and user-driven is your solution going to be. And then your task would be to go through this cycle not only as many times as you can, but as quick as you can. Now, I get the question many, many times, how do I get involved? What do I do, right? So I'm interested, I'm a developer. What do I do? And so far, I found myself giving one of these three answers. So the easiest way and the quickest way is that if you know a coach, or if you know someone who knows a coach, or if you have a coach within your social network, it's very easy to reach out to them. And trust me, coaches are usually very responsive, especially if they understand that you can help them improve their work with their athletes. The second answer that I usually give is to get in touch with a sports federation. If you're really passionate about one specific sport, you can call them up. Call their sports science department, call their coaching department, and I'm sure that they will be extremely happy to talk to you, and they will be very interested in learning from you. The third one is getting in contact with the Olympic Committee. The Olympic committees usually have sports science departments or groups, or sports technology departments and groups, and I strongly encourage you to get in contact with the Olympic committees in your countries. If you're in the US, come to me. I'd love to have a chat with you. It's very easy to find me. I will leave you with this. I will leave you with the fact that I strongly and truly believe that sport can make a difference in this world. It can help us live better. It can help us promote all of the different values that sports can represent. Friendship, excellence. And I also believe that you guys have in your hands the keys, not only to who's going to be winning the next medals, but in helping your athletes achieve their dreams, and in helping your country be lifted on the highest podium possible. Thank you.